as background to those of you who are here, we will get started in a moment. This is the session Peace, the Foundation for Investing. This is the IFB. We host so many events all year, every year for 18 years. And we are growing incredibly fast because there is a need. I'm just going to make polite chit chat and pick on people to say good morning. My name is Kayvon. I've been working in conservation and climate change for 20 years in developing countries. Started in the Solomon Islands, a post-conflict state, then went to Bhutan, then Samoa, and most recently Zambia. So I live and work in these places, and I see what conflict does to these places, to people who are brothers and cousins and sisters, and aunts, and how it fragments villages and countries. This happened in the Solomon Islands, and it was something remarkable to see. Again, we're going to give people a few minutes to join. It's actually, it is the top of the hour. We usually get started 3 to 5 minutes late to allow, as I said before, humans to be humans. We're all stretched and over-registered to too many of these sessions, but grateful that you're all attending. Thank you. I'm going to stop talking.
Good morning, everyone.
Azadeh Khanum, thank you for joining again.
Notice the top Firuz came on, John. Good morning. Rozdun b'khair.
Yes, khash kara. We are Iranian and could use some love right now, so
Oh, man.
feel free.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're hoping for the best. We are all hoping for resolve and the best.
Yeah.
Did you do anything special for Nowruz?
I did.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, Nowruz is the first day of spring, and we celebrate with sometimes with something called a Haftzin. Haftzin is
Yes.
7 elements that begin with the letter S. And we usually sit by a river, flowing water, symbolic of change and cleansing. And there's fire present and so many other
Yes.
beautiful things that connect us back to the elements and ourselves.
Absolutely. Well said.
Ha. Thank you all for who are joining us right now. We're going to give it just 2 more minutes to allow others to join. We've had a remarkable number of registrants over the last couple of weeks, and very excited to share this panel with you. Thank you. Hello, Marcel. That looks like a very comfortable sweater. How are you?
Too bad, thank you. Yeah, it is comfortable.
Great. Thank you for joining. Where are you joining from?
I'm joining from the Netherlands.
Oh, brilliant. I worked for SNV for 3 years in Bhutan.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That must have been a great experience. Bhutan. Oh,
Everyone says that.
yeah, I know.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Nothing is perfect, but it is beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Ellen, how are you?
Hi, good morning for you guys. I'm assuming you're talking to me. Nice to meet you, Ellen, and I'm good. It's afternoon for me in Sweden.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you for joining, huh? Making time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we do appreciate it. So good morning. We're going to give it 1 more minute and we'll get started.
I like this random picking. Kevin.
Yeah, we have to, right? It's about connecting. And if we don't connect, how do we achieve peace?
That's so true.
Yeah. Hello, Terry. Thank you for joining.
Hi, good morning from Toronto.
Good morning. Thank you for joining.
Thanks.
We have Terry Wu here also. She is just muted.
I'm based in Paris.
Ah, brilliant. Thank you for
Yeah.
joining. Great.
Sure.
Great. Great. Okay, why don't we get started? Good morning. My name is Keyvan Azadi. I head up Impact for Breakfast. I'm going to briefly introduce the network and hand it off to this remarkable panel to talk about peace and why it's the foundation for investing. IFB, Impact for Breakfast, started 18 years ago under the leadership of Audrey, who is here or maybe not right now, but usually part of it. Since in 18 years, we've grown from a handful of people around a table to over 6,000 members now. Importantly, our members are weighted approximately 2/3 to individuals that reside somewhere in the capital stack. So they hold the resources and connections sometimes to mobilize or generate momentum for some of these great ideas that we share. So we provide needs and opportunities on one side and try to connect them with the resources and networks to bring the pieces together to make the change that we want to see. So over 18 years, over 650 sessions. We're organized in a decentralized way, 50 chapters. 49 of them are in the cities where you are possibly. One of them is the global, which is this session. So with that, the session is being recorded. We are going to be asking you to put any questions in the chat. We will field those. The first half of this session will be presentations approximately, and the back half will be all of your questions. So at any point, once we open up the floor, please feel free to ask your questions. Turn your camera on and ask if you're comfortable. If not, we will get to your questions in the chat. Following this session, we will send you a thank you note with a slightly polished video link that is housed on our YouTube channel, and that's where it's at. I woke up this morning with one thought. You cannot achieve peace with one side on its knees. You cannot achieve at least true peace. And we are seeing this forcing one side to its knees repeatedly. I think this panel is going to talk about what it takes to achieve true peace. So thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Bettina.
Kevin, thank you for the introduction and the reflection as well. My name is Bettina Böckle. I'm based in Geneva, and I provide independent advisory work as well as training in development finance, innovative finance, with specific focus on what I call social lens investing. That could be gender, youth, or peace. So specifically the social side of impact and value creation, but also of risk management. And while my husband stepped out, like, "Oh, you have so many registrants. Are you working for this in this firm today?" I said, "No, today I'm working for myself. And I'm doing this because I'm a believer in change, and that each of us can enable and drive the change because we do live in some turbulent times, with peace increasingly being absent in many places of the world. And contrary to a long-held assumption, it's not only governments that shape peace. They actually increasingly wage war, but also private sector actors, investors, philanthropists, and companies. We all influence whether social cohesion is strengthened or fragile contexts are further strained. And as impact capital continues to move into more and more complex and conflict-affected environments as they are increasing, the question is no longer whether investment affects peace. Hence, the title of the panel is not "Peace, the Foundation for Investing?" ? It is a full stop or even no stop. And rather, how can investment act responsibly in ways not only avoiding the creation of conflict as an identified risk, which often happens. We just look at it in the negative part and notion of the term, but proactively working towards conditions that can create peace as such a unique value. And as Kevin mentioned, this is an interdisciplinary and interactive session, and we will explore how peace is being approached as an investment topic and practice. So whether and when contributing to peace can make business sense, or maybe there are instances where we would rather say, let's not approach it as a business topic in this specific context, and how different actors are navigating this tension on the ground. And I'll introduce those participants in a moment. But then I still wanted to say a word about the word peace building, because I've worked in a peace building organization, and where I've learned that peace builder, well, there is a big P, which positions those that are, contributing actively to ceasefire agreements, helping mediation between conflict or armed groups. So it's a big piece, or the large piece, P, but there also is a small p, and where I feel many of us probably can make a contribution and shape a conversation with realistic roles, helping to define with practical guardrails and enabling capital to avoid harm while supporting solutions that are locally rooted, endorsed beyond investors' exit. So with that, I will introduce with whom we'll be doing the first part of this webinar, which is going to be sort of next half hour, I guess. And I know my colleague Kevin, he will keep an eye on me, making sure that I keep time so that each of us can have an opportunity to ask questions in a conversation. So I'm based in Geneva, and so the organizations that you will see today, while they operate from the Geneva, Switzerland area, they have local operation. They have global operations with a localized focus. So there is the Peace Nexus Foundation with Christian Petillon and his partner organization based in West Africa, Manuela Boma-Atta. She's from Investisseurs et Partenaires. Then there is, from the Peace Dividend Initiative, Jonathan Harlander, as well as Carolina Guerrero. Jonathan is based here in Geneva, and Carolina in Colombia, where she leads their operations on the ground, as well as Catherine Burkell, Partnerships Lead at SDG Impact Finance Initiative. So I will switch. We have prepared a few slides, not too many, because no death through PowerPoint today. And I'll invite, hold on a second, I'll have to share my screen, and of course it will take a second for me to do that while I'm talking. And it's never seamless, even if it seems to. Sorry, just make sure I have presentation mode here. Okay. Yes, great. So just of course, our title, and I will pass directly to our Peace Nexus colleagues, if it's okay with you. Kristen and Manuela, are you ready?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Should I take over now?
Yes.
All right.
I'll close my mouth.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think you guys are quite lucky. We have a fantastic duo today. Manuela and myself will present you a bit our partnership and how we've been integrating a Peace Lens into investment. And I'll say a few words about the Peace Nexus and how we do this and why we're actually doing this. And then I'll hand over to Manuela. Peace Nexus is a Swiss private foundation. We have for main mission to actually strengthen the capacity of organization so they can better contribute to peace in general. But we do this in different ways. I'm not going to go through all the different pillars of our approach and programs, but what is important right now and what is particularly relevant for this discussion is that the business engagement program that I lead is that, in a way, working directly with companies and investors to integrate conflict sensitivity into their practices, so to make them more responsible on how they operate in this context. And second is as an investor. We also deploy our own capital from our endowment in fragile and conflict-affected context to have a positive contribution in this context. So that's two sort of like hats that we use to really work on this peace team. And our collaboration with INP, Investisseurs et Partenaires, bring these two roles together. Peace Nexus is both an investor in INP and also a technical partner on conflict sensitivity. And I'll hand over to Manuela. And actually, Bettina, you can go to the next slide, sorry.
Thank you, Kristen, and hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be on this call. So I am Manuela Bomata. I'm working for Investisseurs et Partenaires as an ESG and Impact Officer. I'm actually based in Ivory Coast, but now I'm in Burkina Faso supporting one of the partner funds we have. So INP has been supporting African entrepreneurs exclusively for now more than 20 years. We have 8 offices with 1 historic office in Paris, and our work is divided into 3 main activities. So first, directly supporting African entrepreneurs through equity funding and also seed funding programs. And the program I'm working for also supporting African team investment. So with a fund of fund programs, and the one I'm working for is INP development. So we've been creating a local investment fund for now in 7 countries, and especially in the Sahel region. So Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali. We're looking to also open in DRC, but also Cameroon, etc. And then we have INP ecosystem. So how we can reinforce the ecosystem and help more African entrepreneurs get access to funding. So briefly, to introduce INP, and as I was mentioning, we are working in the Sahel region especially, and we are seeing more and more, things and issues, challenges related to how we do integrate conflict sensitivity and social cohesion in our activities as part of the risk, of course, for the activities as well. But as an impact investment group, we also really focusing on the impact, the social impact we are delivering on the populations. And that's also how I would say the collaboration with Peace Nexus starting, and we're really happy to have Peace Nexus on board with us, providing a lot of counseling, technical assistance as well to help us embed social cohesion and conflict sensitivity in our activities. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Yeah.
Just maybe also on this, I think the what is at the core of this partnership is it's based on a very simple idea: is that business is not neutral. So companies and investors play a role in shaping local dynamics and actually have a positive or negative role in terms of peace. And so what really matters here is just that companies, where they operate and how they operate, is important. And the same apply for investors and how and where they allocate capital. And it's really based on these assumptions that we have been sort of like developing this partnership.
Well, thank you, Bettina. So to introduce what we're really doing. So as I was explaining, IPDev has a different model where we actually create the local investment fund. So we do due diligences, market analysis. And for now, let's say let me take the example of the fund we have in Burkina Faso. The fund is celebrating its 10th anniversary now, and right from the beginning, as an ESG and Impact fund, the fund had in place a lot of ESG elements to mitigate risk, also fight against money laundering, first work, etc. However, we did realize that this became insufficient if we really wanted to target, let's say, more conflicts and how we make sure that, for example, the investment doesn't benefit to terrorist group, etc. So now, when we're talking about conflict here, it's more focused on armed conflict here in the case of the Sahel region. So we had this ambition to be more conflict sensitive and make sure that first what we do not harm population, do not harm the investment, and that we make sure that first, of course, the fund and the companies they're investing in do not suffer from, or how we can mitigate the effect of conflicts on them. But however, we also needed to make sure that the funds themselves did not fund and or reinforce conflicts. So with all this in mind, we had this ambition, and I already mentioned how we start working with BizNexus, but with BizNexus, we designed a diagnosis, first a pilot in Burkina Faso. So one of the objectives was to have a pilot in Burkina Faso at the level of the fund of funds. So first, how we make sure that at IPDev level, that since we are overseeing a lot of investment fund, how we make sure that within all of them, we are able to integrate conflict sensitiveness. And then at the level of the countries, how we make sure that the funds in their daily practices, when they're analyzing the company, when they want to invest, how they monitor their companies, how they make sure that conflict sensitivity is well integrated. And then last level, the level of the SMEs. So finally, at the SME level, in their day-to-day, how are these things integrated? So we did the first diagnosis because we realized that one of the first objectives was to be able to show to the fund that they did have an impact on companies, and there's companies as well. Some of the time, the first step is to conflicts, and we need to acknowledge that we do have an impact and need to see that. So we did a first diagnosis with consultants that analyze first at the fund level in terms of the policies, the processes as well, to make sure that what was in place today, but also at the level of the SMEs. So we went to a sample of SMEs to make sure that in different sectors. So we had agribusinesses, we have education, but we also have manufacturing in different regions of the countries as well, to see how were these SMEs reacting to conflict and how were they influencing the conflict as well. Based on the diagnosis, now we are reaching a next step, which is to say, okay, now we have the diagnosis. How do we make sure that the fund really integrate conflict sensitivity in its approach through sourcing, screening, due diligences? So we acknowledge that we needed to define the tailored indicators for the fund that would help them, monitor conflict sensitivity. So we are moving forward this next step of the diagnosis, where now we are recruiting a consultant, which will be locally based, with the idea to have them assist the investment team, help them review the current practices, but mainly go to the SMEs and test those different indicators at the different stages of the investment. And we're doing all of this, as I was saying, with a first pilot in Burkina Faso, with the objective to then scale up at the level of all the different funds we are supporting. So maybe Kristen, if you want to add, or we can move to the next slide.
I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah.
Okay.
No, thanks. I think that was a very good overview of the approach, and I think maybe just to close on this and come up with a bit like how we approach measurement and the challenges that we're facing. So I think a key starting point here is that we need to move beyond the policies and really focus on practices. And I think conflict sensitivity, it's not having the right statement or the right policies. It's really about what happened on the ground. And so we're really trying to integrate conflict sensitivity into the investment cycle, step by step, as mentioned by Manuela, from sourcing, screening, due diligence, and monitoring. At the SME level, we assess what we call the posture of the company, how the business is operating in practice. And it's really about like making sure that there is, at least the do no harm is fully integrated at the SME level. So we look at, how they hire staff, how they source materials, how they engage with stakeholders, how they manage grievances. So the whole, the whole process. On the peace dimension, I think it's quite difficult to measure peace directly, when you do investment and when you work with SMEs. So especially for small, we are talking about small ticket size investment, loan to SMEs. So we rely on proxy indicators linked to social cohesion. So such as inclusions across groups, job distribution. So it's not only about like creating jobs, but how the job is actually distributed across the different communities. The supplier diversity, the patterns in terms of grievances. So here we're not necessarily, in making this investment into these SMEs, we are not trying to create a peace product. We're really trying to embed conflict sensitivity into core investment decision, into the design of the investment, and to have this peace element, this peace positiveness, we identify sectors and geographies that have a greater potential for social cohesion in the context of Burkina Faso, and ensuring that these business practices support social cohesion instead of undermining it. That's really how we're trying to balance this conflict sensitivity approach with the peace positiveness by targeting sectors and geographies for social cohesions. And of course, there are challenges. There are plenty of challenges. But measuring peace impact directly remains difficult. So proxies are key. So what are the proxies? We're going through this. We are like working on these indicators. Capacity also is a challenge, is often very limited, both at the fund, but also at the SME level. We're talking about very small companies operating in very difficult contexts. So you cannot bombard them with policies and guidance, etc. It needs to be very practical. So the tools and the approach need to be very practical and usable. And ultimately, is one of the big frontier here is like how you're strengthening the link between practices and financial performance in terms of like measuring your impact in this context. So it's really about making SMEs agent of positive change in this context by allocating the capital in a very conflict sensitive manner. So I think I'm going to stop here except if Manuela, you have anything to add. And at least we are like in the 10 minutes.
No, you said it all, Kristen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Super. I was just looking at my clock on the right bottom of my screen. It's wonderful. Catherine, we're going to talk about CIFI and SDG Impact Initiative next. And noting to everyone here that this is slightly different than what we just heard from Peace Nexus, because CIFI is a blended finance platform blending public and private philanthropic investments. And Catherine will tell us a little bit more how that works. It's your showtime, Catherine.
Thank you, Bettina. And it's changing to intervene after such a good speakers, but also I'm a very big fan of Peace Nexus work. The fact that they allocate endowment funding to the impact investing, it's quite rare for the foundation in general. So this is why, kudos to Peace Nexus. So now talking about CIFI, if we can have a next slide. Indeed, as was mentioned, we're not a peace building actor. We are a blended finance platform that pulls capital from public sector funders or governments, private philanthropists into one pot, and then use this capital catalytically to make sure that impact investing market is mainstream, to change the financial system in a way that brings private capital into the emerging markets. And of course, in a more complex context, when you operate, it is important to keep into account the peace, social cohesion. It's not external to investment, as has been discussed already today. It shapes the risk, it shapes the pricing. So, of course, this needs to be integrated in the decision making. And I will use a couple of examples to talk about it. Now, just before, to few words about CEFI. We have this pooling capacity capital from catalytic providers. Now, we select projects based on the competitive call for proposals. We operate across SDGs, so we cover all SDGs, and across all the regions globally. Of course, the majority of our portfolio is still in the more middle-income countries, lower middle-income and upper middle-income countries, but we also have a few solutions in the portfolio in LDCs. So to date, we've supported 32 different initiatives across grants and also investment portfolio. And why we exist to mobilize private capital. And for private capital, and this is the transition to our topic today, for a private investor, what is important, it's to make sure that the solutions are de-risked. It's to make sure that the structure, it's pretty simple to understand. And of course, that there is a need in the market, and we're addressing the need to the market. And if I can have a next slide. Let's see if it does. We have the integrated and holistic structure. So first, it's innovation window. This is where we give grants for feasibility studies, design studies, proof of concepts, really to bring more financial products to the market. To test them, some of them will become investment ready, some will not, but this is the point. This is about innovation. And the examples I will give today are coming from this window, from our grant window. Sometimes we do provide as well reimbursable grants, depending on the maturity of the project. Now, second window, this is the investment window where we de-risk impact funds, investing in the junior equity. So this is the stacked approach for blended finance. So probably for different audience, if we're not familiar, blended financing means the layering. So there is a fund, and then there are different risks and investors with different appetite for the risk. They take different positions. So junior equity, it's a junior layer in general is the riskiest position. Of course, then private investor usually come on the senior level. And then ecosystem window, this is where we work more broadly on the barriers for the impact investing markets, and more importantly, in the barriers for private capital providers, private investors to come into the emerging and more complex contexts. Now, first things first, talking about our solutions. If I can have next slide, please. So, we had one call for proposal focusing specifically on SDG 16 piece. And we found an amazing project, Human Planning and Interpeace, where we funded the feasibility study for the Humanitarian Development Peace Fund. Now, and this is very interesting solution here because this is where we can see some of the major barriers that are affecting private capital flow. So, of course, fragility of the context does affect investability because, again, private investors, they're looking for more secure, let's say, context, more clear context. Now, this is where the structuring, the correct structuring, rather than the size of the fund, that will bring private investors in. So, structure means more than volume. This is the postulate that I want to highlight. And this project, it's explaining this very well. Initially, the idea was to launch quite a complex outcome-based fund of 100 million that includes both impact bonds and also more specific impact-linked debt, more simple one, more direct investment in the companies. After doing the feasibility study, the investees, so the innovators, they realized that for the context, it's not suitable, the initial complex model. Private investors, they need simplicity. Context needs, because of some of the absorption capacity, needs simpler instruments and more gradual implementation. So this is why they changed. And this is the important part. In the complex situations, you do need to adapt. And this is what CEFI funded. We didn't fund the specific outcome, okay, this is the fund that will happen. We funded the feasibility studies that will explain what is the best way to structure capital in a way that bring capital where it's missing the most. And as a result, this specific project will start with a pilot in Somalia, but then will expand to other contexts such as Ethiopia, Kenya, DRC, and other sub-Saharan markets. There, this is, I think, the humanitarian funding up there. It's 6.9 billion, so it's massive. And our job as the private sector catalytic funder is to make sure that financial system responds to where it's needed. It doesn't solve all the issues, don't get me wrong. In emergency response, it is important to have traditional grants. Now, in the more complex situation, more protracted crises, it is important to make sure that the private sector can address more sustainable needs and more long-term needs. Now, about integrating the P sensitivity into the impact linked, into the investment process. Again, as Manuela and Kristen described, this is something that will be also integrated in this fund. This is the findings that they found to align with this SDG 16. It's not about necessarily linking financial triggers. So we pay you where you reach a certain outcome to the SDG 16, to the piece. It's about integrating it across the process. And this is what the fund will do, and also working with SMEs. So the fund will invest in SMEs to create job opportunities, to hire across community lines, so refugee, displacement affected population plus host communities. And of course, this can be and will be managed in the results reporting. If I can have next slide. So now we saw the importance of structuring properly, in the risking properly, into the bringing private capital to the complex settings. Now, the next message that I want to highlight, it's the local engagement and importance of local engagement. So first, you do need to work with locally based organizations. And in the HDP fund, for instance, Interpeace and Human Planet, they selected locally based fund manager in Somalia, Shuraka organization. And I want to talk a little bit about a different project that is called Action for Oceans. And this is our investee from the very, very first call for proposal that CIFI ran. And the model is amazing because it's a community-led. And this is about, at the same time, preserving biodiversity, so marine biodiversity, plus creating income-generating opportunities, livelihood opportunities for local farmers. And the specific angle of these projects that attracted CIFI, and this is why we funded, it was to create Africa Fair Seaweed Finance Facility. So within of what Action for Ocean as a community conservation, community-driven marine conservation organization is doing, it's to create a specific envelope, specific program focusing on women-led climate finance facility on the seaweed farming. Now, it's part of the operations, but this follows the same complete approach. It's they work with community-based organizations. So, for instance, beach management units, collaborative fisheries management areas that do the deployment. They monitor the beach. They making sure that negotiation about the reef closure, for instance, for fishing, happens in line with different communities' interest. And they also, of course, as well have this amazing mechanism, Village Saving and Loan Association, where people put their savings in and then provided loan to the members of community that need the loan to increase their business. And we finalized this grant. We already see the good outcomes of our grant. We saw that the monthly earning for the woman in the seaweed facility, they increased. But in this discussion, what is relevant is really this community leading angle. There are, so Action for Ocean, they organize discussions with the local leaders. They organize the sensibilization of local leaders, for instance, for the woman involvement in the seaweed farming. And it's not only on the country level, the big P that Bettina mentioned, that it has to happen. It has to happen, the investment are happening in the community level. So community level social cohesion, this is what drives this investable environment that will be safe and that will allow eventually the entrepreneurship grow, the social outcomes grow, and so on. Now, I'll pause here, and I'm sure there will be a lot of questions. These are just the two projects examples. CIFI, again, it's a more fund approach on the nonprofit level, but I will be very happy to talk more about this project and highlight and also even connect if you're interested to invest in them or probably to learn from our innovators. Now, I want to finalize with a sentence that not all capital is stabilizing. Again, in some contexts, yes, you do need grants. Yes, you need the traditional humanitarian assistance. And then in some contexts, when in protracted crisis, I come from NRC, Norwegian Refugee Council, so humanitarian organization background, and there, the refugee settlement, they can last from 10, 15 years. And this is where the investment needs to happen, because only humanitarian and only development funding will not be sufficient, specifically given current geopolitical landscape. But now the question is how we structure these investments and how to making sure that we use these investments as efficiently as possible. So I'll leave it here, and I'm sure we will hear more from wonderful speakers today, and of course, open to any questions. Thank you very much.
Catherine, thank you so much. I was just about to call you out, but we just managed the time. And it's been very interesting to listen to you and the examples exposed. Jonathan and Carolina from Peace Dividend Initiative, are you ready to go as well? And I will stop the slideshow in the meanwhile. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. Thank you, Bettina, and thank you also for inviting us to speak today and for the panelists for the interesting introductions they made. So I'm Jonathan Harlander. I'm the Director of Operations for PDI. Maybe I say a few words to introduce PDI, and then I'll give the floor to my colleague, Carolina. So PDI stands for Peace Dividend Initiative. We're a Geneva-based foundation. We were founded in 2021, so we are 5 years old. We're no longer a baby, we're now a child, I'd say. What we do is we attempt to bridge mediation and economic factors to help businesses contribute to peace, in essence. So we're really trying to consolidate the benefits from peace and to prevent, obviously, the reemergence of conflict. There are three main ways we do this, so pillars in our efforts. The first one is economic dialogue. So we either directly conduct or we support economic dialogues, which bring together investors, entrepreneurs, local and national authorities, but also experts to discuss the ways in which the economic sector could play a positive role to reinforce peace. Number two, which is the main part of our activity, is incubation. So we identify businesses that have a high potential to play a positive role on peace, and then we support them. We support them two ways. On the one hand, we provide some financing, so we give them grants. And on the other hand, we also provide them with expertise and mentoring. That means anything from marketing, obtaining certification, access to new markets, any help that a small business might need to bloom. And the last pillar of our activity is, let's say, tentative at this stage. So we're developing an impact investment fund, which focuses on peace. And the idea here is to scale the type of efforts that we do at the incubation level. Maybe I say a few words about where we are. So we're present globally, from Colombia, where my colleague Carolina will say a few words about the projects that she leads, where we produce cosmetics, honey, chocolate. And then on the sort of other end of what I would call an epic split is Bougainville, where we produce some soap, virgin coconut oil, and chocolate. And in between, we also have a presence in Moldova, in Zimbabwe as of today. We just launched a new project today. And we have a small activity also in Ukraine where we help a small business produce some honey. And in addition to that, we have some discrete efforts, which I want mentioned here. The overarching objective for us is to have a positive impact on peace, which is very broad, as you can imagine. So it's anything from addressing the conflict drivers to creating economic incentives or alternatives for the youth, or stimulating collaboration across some of the divides that might exist. There's, in terms of methodology, several steps that we go through in a way that's similar to what my fellow panelists described. So there's an analysis, first at country level and then at project level, where we go through some of the conflict drivers, but also identify what are the sectors of the economy that might have a positive impact, but also the specific businesses that have the highest potential for us. And then we run through an incubation committee, we select the business, and then we start implementing, i.e. supporting these businesses. I'll say one last word about impact, because I think that's an important subject here, and probably we'll go through it again during the questions. For us, we separate between, on the one hand, the business incubators. And so for our businesses, we have objectives and key results, or famous OKRs, and it can be anything from the number of products that are produced, is there a growth there? The revenue growth, it can be the number of active sales channels, and so on and so forth. So that's the business side. And then we have the peace indicators. And here we look at whether we have a positive impact on the analysis, on the access to the actors, an increased engagement. It can be an improved contribution to the existing conflict management mechanisms. And so that's the way that we look at the impact that we have. And in between both business and peace, sort of at the crossroad, we have what we call the market pathway. So are we creating livelihoods and jobs? Are we creating these economic incentives for people to join businesses rather than an armed group or a criminal group? Do we, in essence, have a structural change, an impact in terms of the structure of the context where we operate there? So maybe I'll stop here. I'll give the floor to Carolina, who can speak about the project in Colombia.
Hi, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. My name is Carolina Guerrero, and I'm a PDI's lead venture developer. I want to bring you a practical case to understand how we work here. Imagine a country where 60% of its biodiversity is centered in the very same regions most affected by armed conflict. Communities with deep ancestral knowledge, incredible fertile land, natural resources with immense medical and commercial value. And at the same time, they get to violence, isolation, and of course, invisibility. That country is Colombia, my country, and one of the places where PDIs work. So Colombia has lived through more than 60 years of internal armed conflict, nearly 10 million registered victims, one of the largest internally displaced population in the world. And this conflict hasn't just affected people, it has destroyed territories, ecosystems, wildlife, and it left entire communities isolated, cut off from markets, with little to no support. But what makes Colombia particularly complex and also particularly compelling, it is its land. It is extraordinarily fertile. It produces plants with deep ancestral and medicinal and commercial value. And yet many of these resources have been trapped between illegality and invisibility. Not because they lack value, but because no one helped, communities turned that natural health wealth into a legal and viable and sustainable economy. And when the bridge doesn't exist, communities don't have real alternatives. And without alternatives, the cycle continues. But it's something that the conflict has not been able to destroy, is the resilience of the communities. The ability to survive, to organize, and to move forward even under the most difficult conditions. And that's exactly what we found in Tibu. Tibu is in the Catatumbo region, right on the border with Venezuela. It's one of the most militarized areas in the country, with an active presence of multiple armed groups. For young people, their options have historically been very limited: leave or be recruited. When PDF arrived, we found something unexpected: a group of young people in their 20s rescuing wild bees, not as a business, as a hobby, as a quiet way of choosing something different. At that point, the project leader had to leave the territory because staying could cost him his life. So imagine being in your 20s and your whole future ahead of you and having to make that decision. But the project didn't stop because others stayed. Others who shared the same desire to build something on their own, and together they kept going. That's where PDA comes in. We don't come with solutions. We start with what's already there and we build from it. So we ask a simple question: what's already working here, and what does it need becomes sustainable? What we did was very practical: technical training, beekeeping best practices, a full redesign of brand and packaging, and the introducing of value-added products like propolis, wax, pollen, things that community didn't even realize they could commercialize. And something important: bees are not just business, they are pollinators. And without them, the extraordinary biodiversity and animation at the beginning doesn't survive either. And something important happened. Those same young people who start rescuing bees as a hobby have now secured $150,000 in government business development funding. So the Colombian government is backing them, so us, and validating that what is there built is real. So these young people are not just building a business, they are becoming a point of references in their community and prove that there is another way and that it spreads. One person with a viable livelihood, with knowledges, with dignity doesn't stand alone, others follow. That's what's really at stake when you invest in people in conflict in affected regions. They're already taking that risk against all odds. So the question that I bring today to you is, can we afford not to do? So that's how I can explain what we can do the work. This is just one project that I bring to you to explain how we work PDI in all the countries that Jonathan mentioned. But we have 8 projects in different regions, but each region has like all the context, the culture that we understand, the biodiversity we saw, and how we can understand all the change value and help them to connect all the points to make them business sustainable. Thank you very much.
Carolina and Jonathan, thank you so much for also providing examples and thoughts from PDI's perspective. So I've collected a few questions here, but I'll also ask Kevin. So first questions from the chat, or first asking questions into the room?
This is your show.
Okay, thanks. I think it was, I wanted to pick up on the impact measurement and indicators, because it's always a question that comes a lot. So Christian Manuela, for example, they explained a little bit how when you work at SME level, you have to define proxy indicators because it's very hard to measure at that level of impact. I thought it was very interesting. I wanted to ask also a bit Jonathan, Carolina, and as well as Catherine, if they had a thought on measurement and what are the questions that you usually get related. Oh, how do you define peace? How do you measure peace? And all that is such a, it's not so easy to answer. Any thoughts from you would be so welcome.
Jonathan, Carolina, would you like to start?
Sure, I could say a few words. I think the question of measuring the impact on peace is one that has existed forever and will continue to exist forever. So I think to some extent, we are trying constantly to refine the tool and be more precise and have indicators which quality is better. Now, in our case, I think specifically on peace, one aspect is that generally you will have context-specific indicators. So based on where you invest, then you will evaluate your impact based on what the conflict triggers were, based on the types of actors that were at conflict or are currently in the conflict. And so that's one of the aspects, is to have these very specific indicators that allow you to measure in each of the context where you operate. The second aspect is something broader. I think I mentioned some of the indicators that we use at PDI. I mentioned the impact that you have, for example, on an existing peace effort. So are you improving the conflict analysis? Are you improving the access to the actors, the stakeholders? Are you contributing also to the mechanism itself? And more generally, because I think the first intervention mentioned the do no harm, which is essential for these types of efforts. Are you conflict neutral? So are you actually not fueling the conflict by providing some financing to actors who will play a negative role or fuel the conflict itself?
Just to add a little thing, to be very specific with the OKRs that we work month per month with our projects and our ventures, is to understand really well the context. It's really important to understand how they have relationship with the communities, how which ways of peace they believe. So it's very important to understand, and that's why PDI has the field of work, because for PDI it's really important that specific understanding.
Thank you, Carolina. Catherine?
Yeah, if I can complement. So building on what colleagues shared, indeed, this is the area that is still developing on the outcome measurement. I'd like to offer a slightly different response. And I do know that there are colleagues that are managing HDP fund are here. So please feel free to comment on specific indicators, but they do use from the lessons learned study proxies as well, indicators that are quantitative, but also in addition, they have qualitative indicators. Now, it is also important because a lot of these indicators, they're self-reported. It's the third-party verification. And what CIFI offers to our investees and innovators, for instance, and we suggest to them to use this third-party certification. It's called Blue Mark, for instance, that are assessing the reporting requirements, reporting processes and how they align with the requirements from investors, and basically assess the robustness of this reporting. And what CIFI offers, it's also to pay for this certification. So just in addition to outcomes, in addition to the challenges that we're currently facing with indicators, what we also need to think about, it's the third-party verification to making sure that it's real. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or additions from the audience? Yes, Jonathan, on the measurement.
Yes, I'm curious about Blue Marks. This is very interesting, and I agree that, I mean, one should probably use an external actor to verify some of the data that is collected. Would such an actor also go to the ground and meet with some of the stakeholders, conduct maybe some surveys, these kind of things? How do you usually do that?
So they are, I'm happy to have this conversation separately also and connect you with the Blue Mark to understand a little bit more from them, but they usually assess the process itself of the reporting. So they also see whether the operator, whether the investee or innovator in question, they do this work. They do go in the ground and check with local communities and so on. But of course, this is they run this scene, so I can't speak for them. But this is why we collaborated. But yeah, happy to discuss separately offline.
Thank you. Maybe another question from the list here, from the chat from prior, and then I'll open for other questions here in the virtual room. And there was a question: how to stop private capital mobilization requirements from distorting mandate. Is there anyone from our speakers be interested to talk about this? Catherine?
I can, yes. It's a good question. And yeah, let's be honest, there is a tension between additionality and not necessarily the tension, but it's a spectrum between additionality and high private capital mobilization. Of course, high private capital mobilization takes place into the more established context, let's say safer, easier context right now. Now, additionality can be still there, and it's not necessarily one against another. This is why a lot of fund managers and CIFI itself, we're using portfolio diversification approach. So we are supporting the solutions where the impact is higher. Probably the mobilization will be on the lower side. But then also we support more fund managers, more established one, more experienced one, when the mobilization will be higher. Impact will be still there, but then it's not least developed, least LDC countries or fragile contexts. These are more established contexts. So this is portfolio approach. So this is one portion of the response. Now, another portion of the response, again, HDP fund that I was talking about, the fact that initially they wanted to go with this very big fund, 100 million, of course, private mobilization figures would be much higher, but the reality is different. They restructured the fund. They focused on a more subsequent approach. So starting with recoverable grants, then introducing impact-linked debt. So really more specific with embedded concessionality, where around less than 50% is private capital mobilization. And this is okay, because this is aligned with the needs in the specific countries. So again, the feasibility is important, the study, to making sure that you respond to the context needs, to what is actually needed out there. But again, great question. There is still work to be done here. And yeah, thank you for this. I hope it clarifies what I explained.
Thank you, Catherine. Kristen, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on what Catherine's say, I think definitely be clear on the mandate first is quite important, and I think capital comes second. It's easy to say when you have capital, but if the mobilization becomes the objective, then you ended up selecting deals for bankability rather than the relevance of the investor. So I think you need to be quite intentional in terms of the type of investors you want to bring in. I think not all capital is equal. You need investors aligned with the time horizon of your project, the risk appetite, and the purpose. If it's really purpose driven at the same time. So I think sometimes there is always a risk of over engineering through blended financing. It kind of can lose a bit the mandate around there. But I think it's a very difficult balance to strike. I think. As a foundation and using our own balance sheet to make this decision, it's easier. But of course, more you attract more investors and start having pull funds, etc., then your mandate get a bit diluted.
Thank you. Anybody else? And otherwise, I'll open for questions as they come along.
Maybe I can ask a question. I'm sorry, I'm on the panel, but I'll take
Oh,
that
yeah, absolutely, please.
opportunity. It was a question for Manuela, if I remember correctly the name, because Burkina Faso is such an interesting context to lead investments. It's a challenging one. I believe there's been 2 coups d'etats in 2022. And so I'd be curious to hear more about some of the challenges that your organization has faced with the, let's say, issues with the political stability in the country.
Thank you, Jonathan. I would have loved to have, the director of the fund here in Burkina Faso here with me, but he went out. But to answer your question first, I would say one of the first strengths of the model is we are working with, local investment funds. So these are funds like registered in Burkina Faso with teams from Burkina Faso. I mean, they know the people, they know the model, and they're able to adjust and adapt. We're working with, local currency as well. So if I want to maybe focus more on what happened around the 2 coups d'etats, of course, we saw, at some point, stops in some activities as well. So we needed at this point to step back and reassess. And one of the strengths we have also is that the team here, they're really reactive. They were able to quickly adjust with the companies and what we do, which kind of is, I would say, very different from other investment funds in terms of the proximity we have with the SMEs is unmatched. Because like every time, people in the SMEs, they do consider the investment team as part of the teams as well. So around what happened with the coup d'etat, first, they needed to step back, then adjust and rethink the strategies to work with the SMEs. And they also needed to accept what wouldn't be able to be done because of we had the coup, of course, but also in the north of the country, you do have some theoretic attacks as well. And for some companies, they had to adjust. They knew that maybe in places they used to source the raw materials, they did not have access to that anymore. Or maybe in some places that they used to sell their products, they couldn't have it. So some, of course, they did see a decrease in their turnover and how they were able to source their raw material. However, we do see with times that things were evolving. With the help of the teams, they were able to find new strategies, maybe also expand to new markets. And one last thing is, at the end of the day, we also need to comply with the law. In Burkina Faso, with the coup, with the new government, they implemented new taxes as well. And, as part of, a fund working in the country, we also need to follow the rule and adjust and go along with them. So for me, it's really having
Manuela?
She told me at the beginning that
local approach.
She's actually
people who knows the country, who knows the entrepreneurs, it helps. Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah. Manuela, it's in and out, but I think we could hear
Sorry.
you.
Sorry, maybe I will turn off the camera. Maybe it will be.
Manuela, now you turned off the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So turn off the camera and leave the microphone on. And
yeah, let me do that.
With another question. I don't know if it's related to Manuela.
So let me do that just quickly to resume. For me, having this local approach with people, investment teams based in the country, from the country, and also being reactive and adjusting to the realities, for me, it's how things were able to work.
Thank you. Catherine, is this directly for Manuela?
No, it's a different suggestion that I have, but I found really interesting what Manuela was explaining.
Okay.
Up to you.
Okay. Maybe just because there's one question in the chat on SMEs. So how the closure of, but this is maybe in general in case Kristen or PDI would like to come in on how the closure of USAID affected the SMEs you might be working with, and what role does the mis and disinformation play within that scheme?
I mean, actually, an interesting element on this is actually we are bringing, the investment vehicle that, Manuela presented, Neri Capital. We have a conflict sensitivity hub that we have been supporting also in Burkina Faso. And now recently, Neri Capital came into the conflict sensitivity hub to help NGOs that are actually facing this, issue of like funding, to help to communicate and provide, sort of knowledge on how to raise capital for their own NGOs. So it's kind of like we have the reverse situation where NGOs now have, instead of like looking at foreign sort of like donors, etc., to support their own activities, are really looking at their own local ecosystem to see how they can get additional capital or like, leverage. And this is where actually when an impact fund came in the picture and provided some sort of like very interesting advice to the NGOs. But just maybe to react on to what Manuela said, I think what makes this vehicle quite interesting is that it's really the leverage capacity. Only 1/3 of the capital comes from INP. The rest comes from national and regional investors, bank and insurance. It means that despite the shocks or the turbulence at the national level, these people are actually still making, investment and making, business activities. So they do have, because you do have local investors embedded in the local vehicle, it kind of like, brings a lot of like sort of power to the vehicle, and this accompaniment model with the SMEs make sure that they can really adapt to the volatility of the context.
Yes, I think that's an interesting, if you want, so effect that maybe we didn't expect, but there can be some positive aspects of further local engagement following, more reduced international presence. Catherine, you want to retake your question where I cut you off prior?
It's not even a question, it's a suggestion, because yes. I see that Marcel is here, and sorry, Marcel, for putting you on the spot, but he was working on developing HDP fund. So if he has something to share specifically on the indicators question that we discussed before, it will be great to hear from horse's mouth, as they say.
Marcel, go ahead.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can just briefly talk about the indicators. We basically use a small set of practical indicators that really tracks how more stability-related factors like inclusion, trust, local relationship, how these show up in how business actually operate. So the aim is therefore to see whether these then translate into more stable portfolio behavior over time, right? So it's not like we're tracking a long list of impact KPIs just to focus on these few key indicators, as I mentioned. And just link them to operational and financial signals, such as early instability, disruptions, or repayment patterns, for instance, when it comes down to SMEs loans. So yeah, that is how we look at it. And well, then maybe the next question is, how do you then connect that to peace, right? Essentially, we're looking at that these indicators connect to peace by tracking these things like inclusion, trust, and cooperation, not really as abstract outcomes, but through how they affect how a business actually operates. So when these factors are strong, business tend to be more stable, and when they're weak, it often shows up in things like the instability of portfolio and disruptions. if that makes any sense to you.
Thank you, Marcel, and it's good to have you here. Molly?
Yes, I have a question if I could.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
thanks so much, everyone, for this amazing panel. My name's Molly. I'm a graduate student at Georgetown University, and I have a background in democracy and human rights, but am focusing on sustainable development finance now in my studies. I think it was Catherine who said this, so hopefully I'm quoting the right person, but I think you mentioned at the end of your session, not all capital is stabilizing. And I was just wondering if you could expand a bit on that. Is it, the presence of capital itself in certain situations, or is it the types of investors in certain contexts, or is it a mismatch, between investment as a source of financing in the context as opposed to different types of financing? I'd love to hear just a bit more about that. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Molly, for the question. It's a little bit of both. As Kristen mentioned, yes, you need to choose your investors as well, if you have such a luxury, of course. Now, a lot of solutions, they are struggling with fundraising. It is a fact. Now, it's also about, as someone who worked across humanitarian, development, and impact investing side of things, so humanitarian, it's very important, humanitarian funding, it's very important for the emergency response. It's needed, but it does not solve the issues of self-reliance, right? This is where the development funding needs to come in, some longer-term projects, longer employment opportunities needs to be placed, climate considerations, and so on. So this is development capital that will solve these problems. Now, development capital, it's specifically now it's limited. There were questions on USAID, for instance. It is limited, so what can we do? And the question then is, okay, impact investors, so private capital. And then, of course, then private capital investors, they are looking for the return. Now, how can we make sure that we do not harm by having some perverse incentives in generating the return for private investors? How to make sure that we integrate the local context and local needs into the decision making? This is why the examples that I've given, they do a lot of work locally. They work with locally based fund managers, and they basically they work with the context. They just don't have this top-down approach that some investors and some funders they do have. It's really looking for what markets needs and adapting to what market needs. So it's a bit combination of these three types of capital, depending on the stage of development, let's say, and also about making sure that the private mobilization is I don't want to say ethical because this is a completely different and philosophical topic, but making sure that it does not harm and there are investment processes, due diligence in place to make sure it is the case.
Thank
I
you.
hope it answers.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Kevin?
Yes, I would love to make a contribution here. I work in conservation for many years. Give a very specific example. You do a carbon project in a particular area, trying to release revenue with the best of intentions, huge amount of money. And if you don't do the foundational work on the why, bringing people together, coalescing them around common objectives, self-interest amplifies. And you end up really perpetuating just greed and more conflict inside areas that have built-in grievance resolution. You don't need to bring in a mechanism. They already do it traditionally, right? So you start to distort with a flood of resources or incentives. So investing in the why is critically important, not getting lost in the how, what the money requires, what indicators require, but really understanding the why at a fundamental level seems to be something that at least speaks to me. I'm going to round out the session because frankly, we're out of time. Really appreciate the contributions from all the panelists and the participants. Thank you for all of your questions. Please keep them coming. We are recording this session. We will do some light editing, share it with you in about within a week the video thank you note with contact information. So should you want to be connected with any of our panelists, please reach out to me or reach out to them directly. We're happy. This is the whole point of this, is to bring people together. So you might have some very interesting questions or a particular opportunity or the resources to generate the momentum needed. Whatever it is, please reach out. This is just the start. Bettina, please.
Yes, I wanted to say can I say a few words before you close and press the finish button?
This is your session.
Wonderful, excellent. So I wanted to say thank you to all those that attended and that participated in the conversation discussion. And I want to leave you with one last little thought that I will share. Peace does not mean an absence of conflicts. Difference will always be there. Peace means solving these differences through peaceful means, through dialogue, education, knowledge, and through humane ways. And of course, it's from one of the Dalai Lamas. Thanks so much for joining. It would be lovely if you stayed in touch one way or the other as Keivan managed, and continue the conversation, inspire others with what you might have learned or enhanced in your learning today, because it will make a difference sharing those thoughts with others. Thanks so much, and be in touch.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.